Hi there. I recorded the episode that you're about to hear a few weeks ago, and I wanted to create this add on for you because of an article that I recently read and a study that was done by the National Education Association in collaboration with the American Psychological Association on understanding and addressing violence against educators in schools. And some of the statistics really gave me pause. They were shocking, but also sadly not surprising. This study was done in the 2021-2022 school year, and there were 12,000 people who participated in the survey was done in 2022 about that school year. And it's appalling because one of the statistics said that most surveyed teachers, 80%, reported they experienced at least one incident of verbal or threatening violence from students during the 2021 to 2022 academic year. And rates of physical violence were lower, but still substantial. Teachers, 56%, reported at least one incident of physical violence from students. I mean, it's shocking that that teachers are going to work and having to experience these things. And so this episode is about helping students advocate for themselves. But I want to urge you to think about this episode for you too. Everything that I say in it, even though I'm talking about teachers teaching students self-advocacy skills, I'm also teaching teachers how to advocate for themselves as well. And one way that you might do that, if you're in a school that has a real serious climate and culture problem where kids' behavior is out of control and you're at a loss as to what to do, and maybe other colleagues are feeling the same, you might want to share this article and this study with your administrators and start a conversation in a staff meeting or with your collaboration team. And I'm saying this thinking and actually feeling quite nervous, because when I do something like this, I don't know. I might talk to a few teachers that I felt safe with about it, and maybe urge them to say something. Oh my goodness, because I'm not teaching anymore, and one of the reasons is because of there are multiple reasons, and I haven't quite I'm not quite ready to share some personal things that I do plan to share on this podcast. But I've just been so burned out. And when you're burned out, when you're experiencing the kind of burnout that I was experiencing, which involved experiencing chronic pain and really low self-esteem and low confidence, and just this feeling that the only way that I could be okay is by protecting myself from having these kinds of hard conversations with staff and in staff meetings. And so, depending on your level of like empowerment and your level of confidence and your level of like ability to speak up on behalf of your school and your students and the teachers there and say something that might be unpopular, like everyone, we all are less capable of that when we're burned out. And so self-advocacy does really take a lot of strength and energy, especially if you're someone who hides and is shy and introverted and highly sensitive. And and scared. So I hope that this episode helps you feel that when you feel ready and when you feel strong enough, that you do have tools available to you, and numbers, like actual data. Thank you, NEA and APA, for doing this study. You have data that you can bring to whoever you think needs it and who would listen, so that you can start advocating not only for yourself, but for your school and for your students. But there's also little things that you can do, for your advocacy for yourself. There's little small things that you can do, like not speaking up, right? Protecting yourself, protecting your energy, setting those boundaries. So there's many, many ways to advocate for yourself and for others. But really, like, if you are not okay, at school and you're barely surviving, advocating in those small, silent ways by setting boundaries, by leaving school at school, only working your contract hours, things like that, not necessarily being the unpopular one in the room speaking up. These are ways of self-advocacy too. These are ways that you can protect yourself. If a student is arguing, if they're getting, passive aggressive, or they're even getting violent, just stop speaking. Don't just, it's not your job to defend, yourself, or get into some sort of altercation with a child or a teen or whoever's in your room. So these are just my best tips. Like, if there is heat in your room, if there's heated, intense things that are happening between you and students, I think one of the best ways to lower that heat is to just let them have the last word. Stop talking. And this has helped me as a parent to, walk away. Let someone who is upset be upset, and don't say anything that would continue to escalate the situation, right? De-escalation strategies involve, not talking, really, like being as quiet as you can, calling for help if you need to, knowing the policies of your school around violence and around when these heated altercations happen between students and teachers, or even between two students, right? So this is a very long intro, and there's another intro that you'll hear too into this topic of self-advocacy, but I just thought that it was really important for me to speak to the research that has just been published from this study, and the importance of teachers learning about self-advocacy too. Thank you so much for listening, and let's go ahead and get to the actual episode now. Welcome to the Empower Students Now podcast, a podcast about equity, neurodiversity, mindfulness, and student engagement. There's a lot that needs to change in our education system. The good news is teachers have the power to make these changes now. Welcome back. I'm Amanda, the host of Empower Students Now. My website, amandarightnow.com, has all sorts of resources for you, including all of the previous podcast episodes. So head over there for sure if you would like to see what I've got going on. Amanda Right Now, WRITE. All right, so we are in the middle of a new series of episodes exploring the, in my opinion, essential skills students need to thrive, no matter what the future holds. And the reason that I'm recording and sharing this information is because AI is really changing things, isn't it? And it's just, I think a lot of educators and school administrators and staff are rethinking, what are our priorities? How are we going to block AI completely? Are we going to try and integrate it somehow? And I think both routes are valid, but I also think that a lot of students and parents and teachers are wondering if AI can do all of this. And if we could just Google things, what's the point of school anymore? I mean, is anyone talking about that but me? If anyone else is talking about that, could you contact me and tell me? Because I feel like there's a lot of people talking about AI, but they're not talking about that particular topic. Like, that I think is it on everyone's minds, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, I know that it's important for students to learn how to read and to learn a love of reading and, to learn basic math facts and things like that. That is important, right? Like, but calculators, but AI, but Google, but Wikipedia. I don't know. It's a very confusing time right now. So that's what prompted me to start the series about, like, what are the skills that students need to thrive in the future. And I think that any teacher could incorporate these lessons into any subject area. I really do. So, because it's relevant, it's very relevant. So last episode, we talked about self-knowledge and just how do you learn who you are, and that you should definitely check that out. This episode is about self-advocacy, the ability to speak up for what you need. And this directly builds on the episode about self-knowledge, because you can't advocate for yourself and your needs if you don't even know what they are and you don't even really know yourself very well, which a lot of kids are discovering who they are, and it's not quite solidified. They're really trying on different identities, different friend groups, different types of clothes, different types of music. They're really experimenting with who they are. But I feel like in our society, I live in the United States, and I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Adults are very good at telling kids who they think they are, right? And so this skill is about giving students space to figure out who they are, and then to be able to stand up for their own opinions and their own needs. So this is a skill that can help students in every single context of their lives, in school, in relationships, in their future workplaces, even in like healthcare settings, like doctors' offices, right? But it's one of those skills that isn't really explicitly taught anywhere. Maybe it's taught in health class, hopefully, but I'm not sure. So it's just sort of like what we all learn by trial and error. And honestly, some of us who are neurodivergent, we just internalize, all of the negative criticism. And also we become chameleons and mask and just try and become people pleasers, and just we become whoever people tell us we are, right? And that definitely happened to me throughout my life. And only in my, early 40s have I started to uncover, like, well, who am I really? Like, what am I good at? What are my weaknesses? So, and how do I stand up for my needs? And that is very, very, very challenging, especially as someone who's a people pleaser. So self-advocacy is the ability to understand what you need, to be able to communicate that need clearly and respectfully, and take action to meet that need. It's not about being demanding or entitled. It's not about always getting your way. And it's not about, telling people what to do. It's really about courage. and the ability to speak up for yourself, even if other people, it makes other people uncomfortable, or it even makes you uncomfortable as someone who might be a people pleaser. So for students, self-advocacy might look like asking a teacher for an extension when they're feeling overwhelmed on an assignment, requesting accommodations like where they want to sit in your classroom that helps them focus, right? Speaking up when a group project isn't going very well, advocating for a club or a program they think should be in your school, setting boundaries with friends or peers. Like a lot of students these days are, you know, actually the word autism, a lot of students are calling each other autistic, right? And they're doing it in sort of a joking way. And they're using it as like they say it's a joke, or they use it as sort of a playful, in a playful way, but really they're using it in a way that's like it's bad, right? Like the R word, right? Like the kids used to say the R word a lot. And I'm not saying it because I think it's wrong, and call each other the R word. And now they're calling each other autistic. And so like a student being able to stand up and say, I really don't like you using that word like a pejorative, right? Like as a bad word. Another way that students can practice self-advocacy is by asking questions in class, like for clarification if they don't understand something. So many of our students struggle with this. So another point to be made about all of this is that students who have been historically marginalized have learned how to be compliant, good students, and not cause trouble, or they don't want to look bad or give, their group a bad name. And, this is cause for concern because it limits their ability to advocate for themselves. So I want to tell you this story. I had a student one year, a ninth grader, and this student, I'll call her Riva. This student would disappear during class to the bathroom, and they would be in the bathroom for like 15, 20 minutes at a time. And with a class of like 33 ninth graders, sometimes it was hard for me to even know that student had just disappeared. Are you having this problem too, high school teachers, middle school teachers, kids just disappearing? And I finally had a moment to have a conversation with this student about how they would go to the bathroom. And it was often the same time every day, for too long, that they were missing out on important instruction. And because I had developed an open, honest relationship with this student, they confided in me that they weren't actually going to the bathroom, that they were wandering around the school looking for their cousin, and their cousin and them would go and just, I don't know, meet up, chat, talk, get out of class, right? So this student was really, really honest about what was actually happening. And I said, but you're missing out on what's happening in class. And they said, but I just need a break, Miss Werner. And I realized that they did, because like our school had block schedules. So we had 90-minute periods. And unfortunately, during this time, we were in portables. So we were in a stuffed portable with like 33 kids, like so small, ninth grade bodies. Okay. And we weren't even allowed to go outside. Like for a while, I let them take breaks outside, and that didn't work out very well. And I was told that I wasn't allowed to do that anymore. And this particular student that was leaving for long periods of time had an IEP. And I realized they need breaks. They need to be able to walk around. And so we came up with a plan where they could go and visit their cousin who was in a teacher's class that I knew that was okay with it too. And so we came up with like a plan so that it didn't feel like they were having to sneak around. And I think this is a good story because it shows sort of the steps for self-advocacy, right? Like this student didn't necessarily come up to me to begin with to say they wanted to do this. They did it behind my back. But if they had had lessons in self-advocacy, maybe they would have come to me with this idea themselves. And that's why I think that these steps that I'm going to share with you can be really helpful for kids learning self-advocacy, especially kids who have IEPs and 504s. They need to know those IEP and 504 accommodations so they can speak up and ask for them. And sometimes they don't feel comfortable. So how can we change that? So first, we have to create a culture where self-advocacy, and like teaching that term, is welcomed, not punished. Think about the messages we as teachers send, both explicit and implicit. Do we respond positively when students ask for help? Or do we make them feel like they should have figured it out on their own? Or they should have listened the first time? Do we honor students who speak up about problems? Or do we label them as complainers? Do we make space for students to have different needs? Or do we expect everyone to fit the same mold? Self-advocacy requires vulnerability. Students have to risk telling us something that might make them look weak or different, or like they're asking for special treatment. If our classroom culture doesn't feel safe enough for that risk, they simply won't do it. And this goes for parents too. If students feel safe talking to their parents openly, they will, right? But if they don't feel safe, they'll keep things from their parents, which isn't a good thing. Okay. Second, we need to explicitly teach the language and process of self-advocacy. Many students don't know how to articulate their needs, especially if they've never seen it modeled. We can teach them with sentence frames. And the slideshow with this episode has these in it. So here's one frame. I'm noticing that I'm struggling with blank. This student that was going to the bathroom, I'm struggling with focusing during block periods. Could we talk about strategies that might help? And one of those strategies might be taking a walking break. Okay, here's another one. I learn better when blank. Would it be possible to blank? I need to let you know that blank. I'd like to request blank. Here's why this would help me. So you can role play these conversations, and we can share our own experiences of having to advocate for ourselves. Okay, so something crucial is that self-advocacy isn't about asking for accommodations when they're struggling. It's also about advocating for themselves when they need more challenge, more depth, more complexity. It's about saying, I'm ready for something harder. I'm really interested in this topic. I want to go deeper. So self-advocacy works in both directions. So that's an important point to remember. Okay, so the third thing you're going to want to do to help build students' ability to self-advocate is to respond to students' attempts at self-advocacy with respect and follow through. When a student takes the risk to advocate for themselves, how we respond will determine whether they ever do it again. Sometimes we can say yes to what they're asking for, and sometimes we can't say yes. And you can teach them this, but we can offer an alternative. Sometimes we need to explain why something isn't possible, but we can still validate that it took courage to ask. We don't want to dismiss them, shame them, or make them regret speaking up. Let me tell you about another moment from my teaching. I had a student who came to me and said, I don't think the way you're grading participation is fair. It favors students who like to talk in front of the whole class, and there are other ways to participate that you're not recognizing. And my reaction at first was really defensive. It was hard to hear, right? And a lot of times if a student is critiquing us or like accusing us of something, the first reaction is going to be defensiveness. That's natural. And I honestly don't even remember what my response was to this student. I think I said, like, can we talk about this later? Because it was in the middle of class. And I did consider what they were saying. And I did later ask, like, hey, what ideas do you have for like more ways of participating and showing that you're participating? And actually, students have really good ideas. So just being open to them and just in the moment, when you feel defensive, like breathe and put off the conversation till later. That's the best tip I have, because defensiveness is definitely something that comes up a lot for me too. So you might be thinking, what about students who already speak up too much, who advocate for themselves too much, who are constantly making demands? There's a difference between self-advocacy and entitlement. Self-advocacy involves understanding your needs, considering the context and the constraints within that context, and communicating respectfully. Entitlement is demanding whatever you want without consideration for others or the situation. So when a student is being entitled, the answer isn't to shut them down, or shame them, but to coach them toward more effective ways of advocating for themselves. So you might repeat back what you hear them say, like, I hear that you want, I can't give that to you right now. Help me understand why this is so important to you. Or I appreciate you speaking up. Let's talk about what's possible given the constraints we're working within in our classroom. You might just say, like, validate. It sounds like you're frustrated. Let's figure out what you actually need here. So we're just, we're not criticizing them for demanding things all the time. We're reframing it, right? Okay. So here are some practical strategies you can use in your classroom. Strategy 1 is to build in regular check-ins, weekly, biweekly, monthly, where students answer questions like, what's working for you in this class? What's challenging? What do you need from me? Is there anything you want to tell me? You could use Google Forms, index cards, or Post-its. I get a lot of ideas from doing this. I mean, and sometimes I do it and don't look at students' responses. Let's be real here. Or I look at them like way long after I gave the survey, right? But it is just a good way of showing students that you're listening to them, right? Another strategy is to model your own self-advocacy. So you might like say something to students like, our class period is right after lunch and you all are bringing your Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out, I'm in California, into class, and it's smelly and it's distracting when you're eating your fast food in here. And so right now, I'm advocating not only for myself because of the smell and the distraction of the crinkling paper and the chewing and all of that. It's distracting me from teaching, but I'm also advocating for the students in the classroom. So I really need to problem solve with you right now. Like, does anyone have any ideas, right? So like, I'm advocating for myself and my students. So another thing, the third strategy I want to talk about is just celebrating self-advocacy when you see it, when a student speaks up for themselves that might not, the less demanding student, just saying things like, I really appreciate you letting me know what you need. Thanks for advocating for yourself. That takes courage. I'm glad you spoke up. Things like that. It really does help students feel valued and like, wow, this actually worked, right? So just to wrap up this episode, here's what I want us to remember. Teaching self-advocacy requires that we share our power with students. And if you're a parent with your child or children, it requires a willingness to be uncomfortable, to hear pushback from students, to feel that defensive feeling, right? It requires us to sometimes change our practices based on student feedback. And that can be challenging. But it's also what transforms us and changes us and makes us better and helps us connect with our students more. Because when students learn that their voice matters, that their needs are valid, that they have the right to advocate for themselves, that's not just a skill, that's a fundamental shift in how they see themselves in the world and how they function in relationships. I really appreciate you listening today. And I have a reflection question for you. Think about a time when a student tried to advocate for themselves in your class. Maybe they did it effectively. Maybe they did it in a more demanding way. How did you respond? And what would you do differently after listening to this episode? No judgment at all. I've made many mistakes shutting many students down in the past. So the point is just to notice the way that you're interacting with students. Notice how many students are advocating for themselves or not advocating for themselves, and maybe make one small change. Like, you could teach the skill by downloading the slides that I created that you could use for teaching this concept to your students. If you'd like access to those slides, they're in the show notes. You just have to sign up for my email list. And then we can connect even more. And you'll hear from me probably once a month or so. I don't email too much. But I do like to stay in connection with especially the people who are listening to this podcast. So definitely join my email list if you're interested. And as always, share this episode with a colleague, with a friend, with whoever you think might gain value from it. Thanks again, and I will see you next time. We're going to talk about teaching ethics.